They called it the Mawline because no one could look at it without thinking of teeth. From the observation blister of Vigilant Crown, the rift cut across the starfield like a wound that refused to close. It glowed in slow, pulsing colors beyond any natural spectrum, flexing as if some gigantic throat were swallowing light and time. Around it, the Nix drive lattice emitters, angular pylons of alien metal and field coils, hung as an uneven halo blinking status codes into the dark. Coordinator Pelich of the Alsari watched the Mawline and did not trust it. That distrust had steered Pelich's career. From junior anomaly analyst to the Alsari, the Concordial Compact chose to sit in Vigilant Crown's central chair. Pelich knew every graph of Mawline behavior for the last 20 standard years, every jitter in the Sentinel array's records. The patterns had never been entirely predictable, but since the failed Cytherex experiment, they were trending in one direction: worse. Pelich's 6 slender fingers tightened on the rail as the human ship approached. ISS Tenacity Wake slid into view like an arrowhead of dark ceramic and pale antennae. Its docking thrusters flared in controlled bursts, matching Vigilant Crown's slow spin. Pelich read the incoming ident codes, already memorized, and suppressed a flutter of unease. Humans were an information cluster for Pelich, uneven, too new to the Compact's quiet equilibrium, associated with remote reports of adaptable soldiers, improvising technicians, and bizarre endurance rituals that bordered on self-harm. Still, the Mawline was changing faster than models predicted. The Compact needed something it did not yet understand. In the docking ring, compressed air hissed as the umbilical sealed. Gravity in that section was a modest half-normal, a compromise between species preferences. At 9 a.m. station time, the hatch cycled open. Commander Dalen Rusk stepped through first. He looked ordinary, Pelich thought. Average human height, dark hair clipped short, uniform without unnecessary ornament. His gait in half-gravity adjusted instantly, a small, unconscious flex in the knees and hips that spoke of practice. The sensors in the bulkhead scanned his vitals as he moved. Heart rate steady, oxygen saturation perfect, pupils constricting just so in the corridor lighting. Behind him came Dr. Myria Cad, slight and sharp-eyed, carrying a compact medical case, and Kaido Bran, a taller figure with a posture that suggested both caution and curiosity, a bag of tools already clipped to his harness. Pelich stepped forward, black and amber eyes widening in the gesture of Alsari greeting. Commander Rusk. Welcome to Vigilant Crown. I am Coordinator Pelich Mawline Operations. Dalen met the alien's gaze without flinching. Some species found Alsari eyes unsettling, recessed deep in their ridged foreheads, but his own expression was open, his hand extended in a gesture most compact species had learned to interpret. Pelich responded with a touch of fingertips, crisp and formal. Thank you for having us, Coordinator, Dalen said. We're honored to assist. Behind Pelich, a heavy figure shifted. Rurach, Grenthari security chief, dense muscle beneath segmented armor, mandibles flexing in silent assessment. To Rurach, humans were thin, fragile things, but he also knew their reputation for surprising performance. His 4 dark eyes followed Kaido's every motion. On the far side of the room, Sevelin of the Velun hovered at a data console, some of their soft limbs coiled on the floor, some holding interface wands. Their translucent skin faintly showed glowing vascular lines beneath. Their thoughts raced 2 steps ahead of their words. They were already running a dozen small simulations of potential human behavior. A projection node on the wall flickered, and the blue-tinted avatar of Iscarel stabilized into view. The Cytherex scientist had elected not to dock in person. The last time their kind had been this close to the Mawline, they had nearly broken it. Pelich led the humans along the corridor, voice smooth and practiced. The Mawline is in a semi-stable phase at the moment. You will have time to acclimate before we begin any critical tasks. The Compact would like your team to undergo local certification first, as per standard integration procedures. Dalen nodded. We've reviewed the documentation, including your continuous operations benchmarks. Pelich's dorsal spines twitched in approval. Yes. In particular, there is one final qualification before you are cleared to interface with the Sentinel array at full authority. Continuous Operations Benchmark 3, COB 3. Myria glanced at Dalen, then at Pelich. Your documentation said COB 3 was an endurance test. More than a test, Pelich replied. They stopped at a viewport that looked down through a shaft into the Sentinel Array's outer ring. Concentric platforms of consoles and sensor domes, all pointed like an eye at the Mawline. COB 3 is the most demanding continuous operation certification sanctioned by the Compact. 30 hours of sustained vigilance, no full sleep, no transfer of command. It is required for any species that wishes to be trusted with primary oversight during a high-variance anomaly event. The corridor's hum seemed to dampen for a moment. Sevelin's fingers paused in their constant, subtle twitching over a portable display. 30 hours, Pelich repeated. We understand this will be at the edge of your capabilities. We will of course provide full medical monitoring and abort authority. Dalen listened, shoulders loose, attention steady. He considered the number, the tone with which Pelich delivered it, the slight stiffness in Rurach's stance, pride in a test that defined their limits. Understood, Dalen said. And what's after that? The silence that followed was almost physical. Sevelin's gaze snapped up from their data pad. Rurach's outer hands flexed, scraping gently against the corridor plating. The projection of Iscarel tilted its head. Pelich blinked, nictitating membranes sliding over those deep-set eyes. After that, yes, Dalen said. COB 3, 30 hours continuous, that's your top benchmark, right? I assumed there was a progression. 30, then 50, then something like that. We do not progress beyond COB 3, Pelich said slowly. At 30 hours, cognitive degradation becomes too severe. Long-term health consequences are not acceptable. Our policy is clear. No sentient operator should be required to remain on task beyond that threshold. To most species, this was obvious. To Pelich, it was a moral line as real as any station bulkhead. Myria shifted her case to her other hand. You retire them after one attempt. From frontline anomaly watch, yes. We have a duty of care. Myria considered the aliens' faces, their genuine concern, and the realization that to them this was the extreme edge. It fit the scattered reports she had read. Cautious rotations, unwavering adherence to rest cycles, automation trusted as much as sapient intuition. For humans, she said gently, 30 hours is rough but not final. We design around it. Deployments, crisis shifts, even, she paused, deciding how much pre-space history made sense here. Search and rescue operations back on Earth would run crews far longer than that, with overlapping shifts, microsleeps, stimulants, and a lot of dumb tricks to stay awake. Rurach emitted a low, buzzing note of disbelief. You damage yourselves for efficiency. Sometimes, Dalen admitted. But we learn from it. We know how to manage the edge. Pelich's spines flattened a fraction. Alsari's mind was a knotted mix of alarm and intrigue. If the humans were boasting, it would be simple to disregard them. But Pelich had reviewed the preliminary human data. Their sleep cycles were flexible. Their hormonal stress responses, while volatile, recovered more quickly than many species. They had cultural rituals around endurance that others did not. Your COB 3 is a line, Dalen said, glancing back at the viewport. Past it, the Mawline flexed, a slow reach of warped color. For us, it's a signpost. Long way to go yet. Sevelin spoke up, voice thin and precise. If that is true, then our current plans for Mawline coverage during instability events may be fundamentally insufficient. Our models already show a surge scenario in which continuity of oversight will be critical. We had assumed that gap coverage by any single team beyond 30 hours was impossible. They did not say it aloud, but in their mind the conclusion had already formed. Humans might be the missing variable. Pelich felt that same conclusion settling, heavy as gravitational shift. There would be new risks, new ethical questions, but the Mawline did not care about ethics, and predictions for its behavior grew darker with every week. Very well, Pelich said. We will proceed with COB 3 as planned. A demonstration for all of us. Dalen nodded once. In his thoughts, the test was not a trial to survive, but a diagnostic. An opportunity to understand the station's expectations, to find where human methods could mesh with alien caution. Myria, for her part, was already running quiet calculations about stimulants, nap cycles, and neurofeedback. Kaido's fingers itched to touch the Sentinel Array's controls, imagining what might happen under real strain. Behind them, unnoticed, the Mawline pulsed, an almost curious flicker. 2 days later, at 8 p.m. station time, Dalen sat alone in a dimmed control sphere, the COB-3 interface encircling him. The Sentinel Array's simulation wrapped around the chair in a holographic shell. Streams of numbers, shifting vector fields, stylized representations of the Mawline's edge. COB-3 was designed to be unforgiving. It threw pseudorandom fluctuations, subsystem anomalies, and communication dropouts at the operator, demanding continuous judgment calls. Outside the sphere, through a transparent panel, Pelich and a cluster of medics and analysts watched. Sevelin had authored part of this simulation suite. They knew its every twist. Their heart rate climbed anyway. At 10 p.m., the test's early confusion began. Dalen handled it with practiced calm, talking his way through each change. Emitter Cluster 2 recalibrated. Telemetry drift at Node 5, routing around. Flagging delta on lattice temperature, requesting secondary check from automated routine. He treated the system not as a set of sacred procedures, but as a partner whose quirks he could learn. At 3 a.m., fatigue began its first insistent whisper. Dalen's eyes burned. His neck ached. He rolled his shoulders, stretched fingers, kept a rhythm in his breathing. Myria, monitoring from outside, noted his brainwave patterns dipping toward drowsiness and spiking back as he countered. She had told him to treat COB-3 not as a test of sheer toughness but as a laboratory. Experiment with tactics now, so they would know what worked later. At 9 a.m., the aliens outside the sphere were, by their own metrics, appalled. Alsari attempting COB-3 would already be sliding into hallucinations. Grenthari would be snapping between aggression and stupor. Velun would be dangerously detached. Dalen was slower, yes, and his speech occasionally faltered, but he remained organized. His error rate was low. His sense of humor, dry comments to nobody in particular, remained intact. "He is still stable," one of the medics said, not quite believing it. Pelich did not respond. The coordinator watched Dalen's face, the determination behind the tired eyes. There were micro-movements there that spoke of effort, and fear ignored, and a lifetime of small experiences. Late nights on orbital maintenance shifts, months on a long-haul ship where circadian rhythms slid, emergency drills that dragged on until the lines between drill and reality blurred. Dalen had come from a coastal city on Earth where storms sometimes knocked out power for days. When he was young, his family had joined neighbors in long nights of keeping ice from melting, tending candles, trading stories in the dark. He had learned then that sometimes all you could do was keep moving, keep watching, because the alternative was letting small problems become disasters. That memory drifted through him around hour 25, a warm flicker behind his eyes. He let it pass. "Update," he said, voice rough. "Simulation anomaly resolved. Requesting next sequence." At hour 29, Pelich considered ordering a halt. The coordinator's duty of care screamed for it. The test was more than passed, but COB-3 had an internal protocol. It did not end until a formal exit command was given by either operator or supervisor. And Pelich rationally knew that this was the chance to see just how wide the gap truly was. At hour 30, the system pinged, a soft chime in Dalen's ear. COB-3 threshold reached. "Commander Rusk," Pelich's voice came through. "You have completed continuous operations benchmark 3. You may stand down." Dalen blinked at the main display. Time meant less than the rhythm of tasks now. The Mawline's representation rotated slowly, a wireframe of threat. He swallowed. "Understood, coordinator." A pause. His mind, even after 30 hours, still worked in the same track as before. "So what's after that?" In the observation room, a murmur ran through the gathered aliens. Pelich remained silent. The question was so casual, so sincere, that it cut through fatigue statistics and ethical concerns. Dalen was not showing off. He genuinely wanted to know what the next phase of training was. "There is no after that," Pelich said finally. "COB-3 is our limit." Dalen exhaled, slow, a faint realizing smile edging across his face. "Then we have some planning to do." By the time the minor Mawline flare arrived a week later, Those plans had been sketched in long cross-species meetings, refined through short drills, and argued over in late-night ethical debates. The flare was minor only by the Mawline's evolving standards. Its outer layers rippled in fast pulses, throwing off stray tendrils of warped gravity that tugged at Vigilant Crown's hull. The Nix drive lattice emitters around it flickered, their phase oscillating like teeth grinding. In the Sentinel array control ring, lights were brighter than usual, every console manned. Humans and aliens sat side by side. Dalen and Myria shared a primary station. Kaito knelt at an open panel, integrating an analog redundancy circuit he had assembled from compact components and a few human ones. Pelich paced the upper platform. Sevelin projected real-time model updates. Their mental focus was as tight as a beam. Rurach stood at the back, feeling useless and tense but unwilling to be elsewhere. "This is an operational trial only," Pelich had said in the briefing. "The Mawline is not expected to exceed our current control capacity. Humans will act in a support role to our automated systems, and we will not exceed 30 continuous hours of any single operator." The words had satisfied official doctrine. The reality, as the surge began, was already deviating. At 2 p.m., the first amplitude spike slid past predicted parameters. Automated dampers engaged, but the return signal carried a stray resonance they did not like. "Seeing additional harmonics at emitter group 3, Kaito said, fingers flying. "Recommending manual override of their phase modulation to ratio 3.2 to 1 instead of the default 2. "That is outside certified profiles," an analyst protested. "It matches what the system is actually doing, not what you thought it would do," Kaito replied. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The data was there. Pelich hesitated, then nodded. "Do it." Kaito made the change. The next spike came through cleaner, less stress on the lattice frame. Sevelin's models scrambled to incorporate the result. They felt the thrill of new data, tempered by dread. The Mawline was changing its language as they watched. Through the hours that followed, human and alien approaches intertwined. Where aliens compartmentalized tasks, humans narrated. Myria insisted everyone keep a verbal log of what they were doing and why, even if only in brief phrases. It kept minds engaged, helped catch errors before they cascaded. "Node 7 routing recalc," Dalen would say. Cross-checking against Sevelin's model. "No, disregard, using current telemetry instead. Calling this pattern delta for future reference." "Pattern delta logged," Sevelin said, eyes darting. They tagged the data and watched as similar patterns emerged later, half expected now. Where aliens relied on automation to avoid fatigue, humans inserted themselves into the gaps, watching for when systems tripped into safety holds too soon or too late. Where aliens had strict policies against overlapping roles, humans multitasked in short bursts, then deliberately stepped back. By the time the flare subsided, Vigilant Crown was less strained than during several previous lesser events. Afterward, in a debrief at 6 p.m., compact evaluators patched in from the CCS Arcspan, projecting their forms in a halo around the conference table. They could not argue with the data. They did, however, argue with what it implied. "Your human methods are effective," admitted one pale, many-eyed official, "but they come dangerously close to sanction fatigue thresholds." Myria met their gaze. "We stayed within your 30-hour rule this time. Next time, that may not be enough. And if you try to forbid us from going further, you might as well forbid yourselves from surviving the event." It was a blunt statement. Pelich watched the reactions ripple. Iscarel spoke from their cool distance. "The Nix drive lattice experiment altered the Mawline's baseline. Our latest analysis indicates that a major surge is now mathematically inevitable. Its predicted duration exceeds any continuity window covered by existing compact doctrine. If we do not adapt, the Arcspan Relay will be lost." Sevelin's models supported that grim picture. In the simulations, the Mawline's energy rose and did not fall for days, churning like a storm without pattern. Automated controls, even with human-inspired tweaks, could not keep up without someone watching constantly, nudging here, compensating there. Each handoff between teams created opportunities for misalignment, and enough misalignments in a row led to the Arcspan corridor tearing itself apart. It was as if the Mawline demanded an unblinking gaze. "Then you propose what?" one of the remote officials asked. "Keeping your humans awake for entire days. That is not adaptation, it is self-destruction." "Not awake the entire time," Dalen said. "Alert enough, through overlap, through methods we've tested." He outlined the continuity cell, a small, tightly knit team embedded within the Sentinel array, living in a sealed module for the duration of the surge, rotating through sleep and watch in microcycles, using stimulants and mental exercises and each other's presence to cling to the edge of functional alertness for as long as required. "Even if they consent," the official said, "we are not in the habit of building doctrine on martyrdom." Dalen shook his head. "No martyrdom. This isn't about dying at the console. It's about designing for the limits of a species that was built to keep going. We chased prey until it fell from exhaustion back home. We worked through nights when stopping would have meant losing crops or ships or entire settlements. We have ugly stories in our history about pushing people too far. We remember them. We learned rules. We know what happens when we go past the line, and what happens when we don't go close enough to it." He glanced at Myria. She took the cue, presenting medical data in precise terms. Cortisol curves, microsleep management, long-term outcomes from long-haul ship crews. It was not safe, but it was possible. Humans did not break cleanly at 30 hours. They bent, splintered, and with the right support, recovered. Pelich listened and thought of standing on the observation deck in youth, watching a smaller anomaly shift colors while a senior coordinator explained the compact's comfort in routine. The Mawline had burned that comfort away. When the transmission cut, Pelich was left with an authorization in hand, a cautious, politically hedged approval to proceed with the continuity cell as an experimental mitigation measure. If it worked, someone else would take credit. If it failed, Pelich's name would be a synonym for hubris in Alsari safety manuals. They signed anyway. When the Mawline surge began, it did so without drama. At 1 p.m. station time, energy readings ticked up. At 2 p.m., the rate of change exceeded the envelope the models called mild. At 4 p.m., the outer Nix drive lattice emitters began resonating with frequencies no one had programmed into them, as if they were humming along to some distant, internal song. Crisis alerts pulsed through vigilant crown. Non-essential personnel evacuated along pre-planned routes, streaming into shuttles bound for the safer orbit of the Helionis system's outermost stations. The station's corridors echoed with the shuffle of feet and the occasional frightened trill of a younger species unused to abiding near things that howled in space-time. At the center, the continuity cell sealed itself into its module. The compartment was modest: 4 acceleration couches, 3 console clusters, a compact medbay alcove, a tiny galley. One wall was transparent, looking down into the Sentinel array's main ring. Above, cables and conduits carried power and telemetry like lifeblood. Dalen, Myria, Kaido, and 2 other human specialists strapped in. Outside the transparent wall, Pelich and Sevelin took up posts at adjacent consoles, while Rurech positioned himself near the main access hatch, a silent guardian. "You still have time to reconsider," Pelich said quietly before the final seal engaged. "So do you," Dalen replied. "You could shut this down, stick to Cobb 3 rotations, and hope the Mawline decides to be kind." Pelich's eyes flashed. "The Mawline is not kind." "Then we'll be stubborn for both of us," Myria said. The seal engaged with a heavy click. Air recyclers hummed. Status lights went from amber to green. At 5 p.m., the surge hit its first wall. The Mawline brightened, not like a light being turned up, but like a bruise darkening under the skin of space. Which fair colors chased each other around its rim. Sensor feeds spiked and jittered. The Sentinel array's external dome strained against the noise. Inside the module, Dalen and Kaido took the first primary watch. Myria hovered between stations, watching them and her displays with equal intensity. She had sensors on their temples, strapped beneath their hair, reading brain waves and stress markers in real time. Small injectable doses of stim lay ready in the med bay. The first hours were almost comfortable. The Mawline flexed within predicted ranges. Sevelin's models, fed with new data, adjusted gracefully. The humans worked in 90-minute cycles, then swapped, slipping into short rests where they closed their eyes but did not sink fully into sleep. By midnight, the surge was still climbing. At 1 a.m., automated failsafes that never should have triggered at once began to do so. The Mawline's resonance overlapped with the station's own structural frequencies, millimeter flexes adding up, trying to shake Vigilant Crown apart from the inside. Decoupling local structural feedback sensors, Kaido said, hands moving faster than anyone else tracking could. Routing them through my analog filters. The digital noise is obscene. He remembered nights on Earth spent in ancient, rumbling trains, where a constant jitter became part of him until he no longer noticed it. He drew on that patience, treated the shaking not as threat but background. Dalen felt more than heard the shift as the emergency braces engaged, locking parts of the station. His focus narrowed to the small things, a flicker on an emitter's readout, a latency spike in telemetry from the far side of the Mawline. Stay on this moment. Do not let your mind leap ahead to days. By 9 a.m. the next day, everyone in the continuity cell had passed the 30-hour point since effective rest. Myria had pushed them to nap whenever possible, like parents forcing children into beds before a long journey. Now that pre-bank of sleep was gone. She hovered over Kaido as he blinked against dry eyes, using a cool compress on his neck between tasks. "We're sliding," she murmured, more to herself than to them. "But we're sliding together." The Mawline seemed to sense the strain. Patterns in its edges had always been statistical noise. Now, something like deliberate forms emerged. On one monitor, a swirl of brighter emissions took on the outline of a human hand reaching. On another, a line of dark moved like a storm front over oceans that were not there. "Do you see that?" one of the unnamed human techs asked, voice shaking. "No," Myria said firmly before even looking. She had trained in sleep labs where volunteers climbing into 80 hours of wakefulness reported faces in the walls, voices in the air. "You see an interpretation, a brain desperate for structure. Call out the data, not the shapes." Sevelin, watching from their station, recognized the same phenomenon they saw in Velun, who stared too long into chaotic starfields. The Mawline was giving their minds raw material. The minds were obligingly making nonsense. Still, even knowing that, the images gnawed. By 3 p.m., Dalen's internal clock had fallen apart. The numbers on the console told him time, but his body felt like it was strung between 2 days and fraying at both ends. "Status," he said, because saying the word grounded him. "Surge amplitude sustained," Sevelin replied. "No downward trend detected. Lattice temperature within yellow band trending up. Structural stress stable." Stable, Dalen thought, was such a misleading word. Stable meant not yet breaking. Stable did not mean safe. He rubbed at his eyes. Myria's hand caught his wrist, gentle but insistent. "You're up in 15 more minutes, then you're down for a full 60, she said. No argument. 60 won't touch this, he muttered. 60 might keep your frontal cortex from turning to soup, she said. We need you for decisions, not as decor. He almost laughed. The sound came out as a short huff. You drive a hard bargain, doctor. She had grown up in a city where hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and coffee, where residents worked through long, hazy nights stitching people back together. Watching humans forget their own faces in exhaustion had taught her that you could not simply demand endurance. You had to structure it. Here, the stakes were higher, but the principle was the same. At some point in the next cycle, Dalen nodded off at his console. It was barely a moment. His head dipped. His eyes slid shut. But in that fraction of time, a Mawline spike that should have been smoothed by a pre-planned adjustment hit an emitter at a slightly wrong angle. Alarms chimed. Kaido's hand shot out, making an impulsive correction that worked only because he had intuition for the hardware's true tolerances. A different nudge might have cracked the mount. Myria's heart lurched. She grabbed Dalen's shoulder, shaking him awake. You're done, she said. Bed now. He jerked, gauging the readings with a soldier's train snapped to attention. Shame flared hot at the edges of his mind. He had sworn not to be the one who slipped. Myria, no, she cut in. You nearly cost us. It's not your fault. It's biology. Go. If you argue, I sedate you, and you wake up with a worse hangover and no say in anything. His instinct was to fight, to prove that he could do more. But underlying that, deeper than ego, was something else: trust. He had chosen these people. He had told Pelich this would be a team, not an individual trial. He unclipped, muscles trembling, and staggered to the narrow bunk recess. The ceiling was low. The pillow was thin. It felt like sacrilege to lie down while the Mawline roared. He did it anyway. Sleep hit him like impact, dreamless, heavy. While he slept, Sevelin and Iskerl discovered the phase drift. At 6 p.m., Sevelin's models diverged from reality not by the usual jitter, but in a smooth, ominous curve. The Nix drive lattice emitters ringing the Mawline were not holding their assigned phases. They were slipping, falling into a pattern that matched no safe configuration. It was like listening to an orchestra where half the instruments had quietly shifted key. "We are losing control of the lattice," Sevelin announced, voice thin. "If the drift reaches a certain point, we will no longer be able to guide energy through it without catastrophic backflow." "Can we correct them remotely?" Pelich asked. "Automated systems are already attempting to," Iskerl's avatar said. Its calmness now was not detachment but tightly held fear. "The Mawline's interference is overwhelming the control signals. Our only option is manual recalibration at the emitters. An EVA. In this storm." Rurach's mandibles clicked. "Grenthari suits can handle high-stress environments. I will go." "Your vestibular system is not adapted to this level of gravitational flux," Iskerl said immediately. "You will lose orientation. The emitters' alignments are precise within centimeters. One mistake." "Then send a drone," Rurach snapped. "We have," Iskerl said. "They failed. The Mawline's interference corrupts their guidance heuristics." Myria looked from the displays to Dalen's sleeping form, then to Kaido. "Humans handle motion sickness better than average," she said. "We evolved to run, climb, ride. Our brains can reconcile conflicting signals longer before panic." "That is your argument," Rurach growled. "That you can vomit in your suits without losing performance." "It is part of it," Kaido said, surprising himself with the steadiness of his tone. He hated zero gravity personally, but he knew the research and he knew human pilots who had danced through storms. "We also have flexible pattern recognition. When sensors lie, we can fall back on instinct and training in a way drones can't. And right now, someone has to go." Myria reached over and shook Dalen awake. He came up swinging internally, dragging his consciousness from the deep well. For a brief moment he did not know where he was. Then the hum of the module, the tension in the air, the Mawline's image on the main display slammed context back into place. "How long?" he croaked. "About 90 minutes, Myria said. "You needed it, but we have a new problem," they explained. As he listened, Dalen's exhaustion settled into a hard, guiding core. "I go," he said. Myria stared at him. "You're not at full." "I'm the one who spent the most time watching the Mawline's patterns this cert," he said. "Out there, that matters. Every second you spend explaining them to someone else is a second we don't have." Rurach's carapace creaked as he tensed. "Commander, with respect, this is madness. You are already damaged." "Not yet," Dalen said. He meant it as reassurance. It came out as quiet determination. In his mind's eye he saw earlier nights, training on orbital rigs, clinging to scaffolds while planets hung upside down, suits telling him his acceleration was one thing while his gut insisted it was another. He remembered learning not to believe any one sense entirely. It was that learning he would need now. Myria clenched her jaw. She pictured his brain like a delicate lattice of its own, strained but not fractured. The risk curves were unacceptable by any ordinary standard. The problem was that ordinary standards did not include rifts that could erase star systems. "I will be in your ear the entire time," she said eventually. "If your vitals spike or your cognitive indicators nosedive, I call an abort. Agree now while you're rational." "Agreed," Dalen said. They suited him up in the cramped airlock leading off the module. The suit was compact standard with human modifications, additional joint flexibility at the shoulders, a HUD tuned to human vision, tactile feedback patches inside the gloves. As Kaido sealed the helmet, Dalen could smell the faint, recycled tang of suit air, a scent that always meant focus ahead, nothing else. At 8 p.m. the outer hatch cycled. Dalen stepped into the void. Vigilant crown curved below him, a ring of metal and glass bristling with instruments. Beyond it, the Mawline filled half his universe. It pulsed, and stars wavered behind it as if seen through a heat mirage. The Nix Drive lattice emitters loomed at uneven distances, angular towers hanging in nothing, glowing faintly with strained fields. His tether uncoiled from the hatch behind him, slim and lifeline tight. "Orientation nominal," came Kaido's voice. "I'm feeding you guide vectors from the analog system. Do not trust the suit's standard positional display. It's already drifting." On Dalen's HUD, a simple arrow and distance number overlaid the emitter he had to reach first. Kaido's analog system was a jury-rigged arrangement of old-fashioned radar pings and timing pulses, less elegant than the digital guidance, but more robust in noise. The Mawline's presence pressed against Dalen's senses. He felt no actual wind, but his mind insisted on hearing a low gale somewhere beyond the helmet, the hiss of some cosmic ocean. He knew that was his brain's attempt to give shape to data outside any ancestral context. "Emitter A in visual," he said. Naming it something other than a sterile number helped. "Copy," Kaido replied. As Dalen pushed off, microthrusters hissed. For an instant, gravity's absence and the visual turmoil of the Mawline sent a lurch through his stomach. He focused on his breathing. In, out, count 4. Again. Images crept at the edges of his vision, familiar shorelines where he had walked as a child, seen from impossible hanging angles. A city skyline beneath the Mawline, as if the rift had swallowed Earth's horizon and stretched it here. "Seeing artifacts," he reported. "Good," Myria said. "Label them, don't interact." He reached the first emitter and clamped his boots to its surface. Up close, it hummed beneath him like a living thing. Field coils cycled in frantic patterns. Indicator strips glowed amber and red. The calibration panel was not designed for gloved hands in a storm like this, but engineering prudence had included manual overrides. "Kaido, I'm at A, what's my delta?" Kaido fed him target shifts, cross-checking against the analog reference. Dalen's fingers worked, muscle memory filling in where thought lagged. He twisted field coils by minute degrees, changed timing parameters, watched numbers scroll that had once lived only in Sevelin's equations. Behind his helmet, sweat crawled down his neck, catching on the suit's lining. The Mawline brightened further. It felt like standing too close to a fire that did not emit heat. As he finished emitter A, a surge wave rolled across the Mawline's face. The field bucked. His tether snapped taut, making him grunt. An image slammed into his mind. His family sitting at a table back on Earth, faces lined and tired, looking up at some threat beyond the window that he could not see. It was so vivid he almost called out. "Label it," Myria's voice cut in as if she were inside his skull. "Don't let it decide your actions. What do you see?" "Family dinner, home," he bit out. "It's wrong scale, wrong horizon, not real." "Good, move to B." He pushed off again. Each transit between emitters cost oxygen and time. His suit's readouts marched relentlessly downward. Behind each number was a real limit: hypoxia, cognitive blurring, muscle tremors. Inside Vigilant Crown, the continuity cell juggled their own battle. With each emitter Dalen calibrated, the lattice's behavior grew slightly saner, but the Mawline's energy still surged in nasty, asymmetrical pulses. The Sentinel array needed constant attention to keep from dumping too much strain onto any one structure. Kaido's analog system hummed on, chirping pings that reverberated back from Dalen's suit transponders. Pelich watched the energy flows change in subtle ways, seeing hope in numbers for the first time in hours. Sevelin's thoughts raced, fragmenting then reassembling as they incorporated fresh data. The Mawline was not just a storm. It was a dynamic system reacting to every touch, every look. They harbored a tiny, guilty thrill at the insight, even as they feared they were observing their own failure. At emitter B, Dalen's hands finally trembled. He clenched them on the panel until the tremors subsided. "Vitals?" he asked, not trusting his own skin. "Heart rate elevated, oxygen at 70%, EEG showing fatigue but no catastrophic anomalies," Myria replied. "You're at the boundary of what I can sanction. Move fast." "I was planning on taking a leisurely stroll," he muttered. The sarcasm tasted like chalk, but it made Myria's lips twitch. Tiny human jokes against a huge, indifferent threat. He set the shifts Kaido called out. One coil stuck, he forced it, grunting with effort. Somewhere metal groaned. "Dalen," Kaido said quietly, Once you finish C, we're past the threshold where a failed emitter cascade is survivable. No pressure, plenty of pressure, Dalen said. Just all on the wrong side of the hull. When he pushed off for the last emitter in the sequence C, his muscles felt heavy, as if gravity had returned only for him. The Mawline filled his view now, a writhing tapestry. In its depths he saw not just Earth but fragments of other worlds he'd never visited. Sevelin's childhood sea caves, Rurach's mountain dens, Pelich's first view of Vigilant Crown as a young Alsari. The Mawline was scraping memories from the station and reflecting them back, distorted. One more, he told himself. What's after that? Back to the hatch. After that, bed. After that, whatever they need. Breaking the impossible into tiny, swallowable tasks had gotten him through survival trails, officer exams, and long waits in hospital corridors. It worked here too, even as his vision narrowed at the edges. Emitter C panel open, he said. Inside the station, Myria saw his oxygen dip into the red band. His EEG showed micro-blackouts, tiny missing moments between bursts of focus. A fear like ice hit her chest. Abort, she said. That's it. You did enough. Kaido, can we compensate for one out-of-phase emitter? Maybe, Kaido said. If everything else goes perfectly, which it will. We don't have time for a second EVA, Pelich added, thinking not just of Dalen but of what the Mawline would do to any other volunteer now. Dalen heard them arguing. Their voices overlapped in his ears. For a heartbeat, he considered obeying. He could feel the tiredness down in his bones, as if his skeleton itself wanted to fold. But the numbers on the panel told their own story. The phase variance at this emitter was already worse than the others had been. Leaving it now would be like reinflating 3/4 of a damaged pressure suit and hoping the vacuum forgave the remaining tier. Myria, he said, surprising himself with how calm he sounded. Give me 60 seconds, then you can yell at me forever. You already gave me more than 30 hours, she shot back. That's a lot of yelling I've banked. You can cash it in if I make it back, he said. He fixed his attention on the next adjustment. Twist, check, lock. He did not think about the 37 other things that could go wrong externally, the many internal failures that might already be ticking. He thought only of the bolt in his gloved grip, the indicator sliding toward a good range, the sense of the field shifting under his boots. 30 seconds, Myria said, voice tight. His breathing had become ragged. Black spots swam at the edges of his vision. He heard faintly the memory of rain on his childhood roof, though there was nothing here to carry that sound. The Mawline, always hungry for a mind's weak spots, offered him a doorway back to a quiet night and a warm bed. He ignored it. Final calibration set, he said. Reading nominal, Kaido confirmed, almost in disbelief. Phase matches analog reference. Lattice synchronization holding. We did it. The moment the last word left the channel, Dalen's legs loosened. His grip slipped. Inside the suit, his consciousness flickered, then went dark. The suit's inertia carried him away from the emitter, spinning gently, tether unspooling until it snapped taut. The jerk sent him into a slow tumble toward the glow of the Mawline. Dalen, Myria shouted. In her displays, his vitals had not flatlined, but they had dropped into the territory she had feared most. Unconscious, oxygen critically low, cardiac rhythm unstable. Rurach moved before anyone fully thought to command him. The Grenthari slammed his heavy hand onto the manual tether reel override. Muscles bunching, mandibles clenched, he hauled. The reel whined, objecting to being driven mechanically. The tether tightened, bit into the emitter's frame, then began to drag Dalen back along its line like a fish on a wire. In the HUD's last signal burst before interference overwhelmed the feed, the Mawline's images coalesced one more time, trying to offer Dalen something. A corridor on Vigilant Crown bathed in safe, ordinary light. The feeling of a job declared finished. The certainty that there would be no more demands, no more after that. His unconscious mind, still anchored by years of habit, rejected the finality. There was always another after, one more conversation, one more system check. Existence itself, for a human, was a chain of and then stretched into the dark. The Mawline, not understanding refusal, let him go. They dragged him into the airlock, hands and claws and soft limbs working together. The hatch spun shut. Pressure rose. Myria was already there, slitting the helmet seals, yanking it off, pressing an oxygen mask to his face. "Come on," she murmured, not as a plea but as an order. "You don't get to tap out before I yell at you." His chest hitched, coughed, then drew in a shaky, full breath. Outside, freed from its worst constraints, the Nyx drive lattice began to fall into a new, less destructive rhythm. With phases aligned, the Mawline's furious energy found cleaner paths to spread and dissipate. The Sentinel array's readings, long lines of rising numbers, began slowly, almost grudgingly, to curve. Over the next hours, the surge ebbed. It did not collapse in a neat line. It staggered, flared, dipped, as if the Mawline were trying different ways to claw back into frenzy. But the lattice held. The continuity cell, down 3 members to exhaustion and 2 to mild cognitive disorientation, still managed to ride out the tail end with help from the now wiser automated systems. By 7 a.m. the next day, the Mawline's glow had faded to its previous sullen simmer. The energy graphs that had filled screens with solid color now showed breathing space between peaks. The seismic tension in Vigilant Crown's bones eased. Decks that had seemed to tilt underfoot flattened. Rescue ships moved in, cautious at first, then more boldly as they confirmed the stability. The CCS Arcspan took up a steady orbit nearby, its presence no longer that of a potential evacuation host, but of an observer and recorder. In the infirmary of Vigilant Crown, Dalen surfaced from real sleep for the first time in days. Light filtered through a transparent wall. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and something like citrus. His body ached in ways he had no names for. His mouth was dry. He tried to sit, failed, and contented himself with turning his head. Myria dozed in a chair nearby, posture at an angle that would make her neck pay later. Kaido sat on the floor, back against the wall, a data slate in hand. Both looked wrung out but alive. Pelich stood at the foot of the bed. The coordinator's dorsal spines were flattened in an expression that in Alsari mixed relief and unease. Their eyes took in Dalen's unsteady focus, the lines etched deeper in his face. "You survived," Pelich said simply. "Seems so," Dalen rasped. "Vigilant Crown survived," Pelich added. "The Arcspan Relay holds. The Mawline has been taught some boundaries." Dalen managed a faint, cracked chuckle. "Good. I didn't like its manners." Pelich's terminal chimed almost timidly. A transmission from the Compact's leadership scrolled across it. Preliminary approval for an extended operations directive to incorporate human-style endurance strategies into anomaly management. Commendations for Vigilant Crown. A request for detailed methodology. Pelich had expected to feel triumph. Instead, there was a complicated weight in their chest, the knowledge that they had seen how far humans could be pushed, and that it would be tempting in the next crisis to push them that far again. "Project Unblinking Sky," Pelich said quietly, "will become the model for future operations. There are many who suddenly speak of your species as if you are a convenient tool for these extended demands." Dalen heard the warning under the words. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again, pinning Pelich with as steady a look as he could manage. "Tools wear out if you don't take care of them," he said. "We'll help you write the manuals, the real ones that say when to stop." Pelich considered this. For a moment, their mind flashed ahead. Future Mawline flares, other anomalies, humans on other stations teaching aliens how to count past 30 without courting collapse. The balance between necessity and exploitation would be delicate. "Your people are remarkable," Pelich said. It was not flattery, it was a statement of problematic fact. "We're persistent," Dalen corrected. "Remarkable is for stories." Pelich tilted their head. "This will become a story." "Then tell it true," Dalen said. "Include the part where we nearly broke." Pelich inclined their head, accepting the charge. After a brief silence, Dalen licked his lips. "So," he said, "you tightened up your surge protocols. You're drafting new directives. You've seen what we can do when things get ugly." "Yes," Pelich said. He let his head sink back into the pillow, a faint, tired half-smile appearing. "All right, so what's after that?" Pelich had no immediate answer. Outside the infirmary window, the Mawline flexed at the edge of sight, its colors muted but its presence undeniable. The Nyx drive lattice emitters around it glowed with a new, steadier pattern, their hum a counterpoint to the rift's slow breathing. For the moment, it rested. For the moment, so did they. But the galaxy did not believe in final tests, and humans, as it happened, did not either.